great episode. I hope you enjoy this one. I really enjoyed talking with my colleague, Michael Rutherford. He is a nutritional therapist too, and a health coach too. I have taken Michael's blood chemistry course, and it's really a fantastic course. So he's always very helpful in our nutritional therapy community. Anytime any of us clinicians have questions about things or whatever, we can put it out to the community. And Michael is very helpful and very quick to offer some advice or some, I guess, recommendations for us or steer us in a direction. And he's really, really great at thyroid health and digestive stuff, fatigue. These are some of his areas of expertise, not just the blood chemistry piece, but also some of these other things. So, and he talks about his own issues with IBS for 20 years and just extreme fatigue. And then more recently, some of his mold issues. And so we talk a lot about health in general and about being a nutritional therapist, but also specifically about mold illness and how do we make sure that we're doing all the things that we can do if we need to heal from mold illness. So Michael is the founder of Fundamental Wellness, and you can check him out. I'll put all the information in the show notes of how to get in touch with him. And if you're interested, if you're a therapist or if you're a functional health coach or any nutritional therapist, I highly recommend his blood chemistry course. I think he even has an advanced course that talks about that too. I just took the 101 and thought it was fantastic. It's been very helpful for me and my work. So you can check that out. And as we begin talking in this episode, we started, as you'll see, it goes right to, because we were talking and I realized I should probably hit record. But Michael is the reason that I tried cod liver, because Michael was talking a lot about it in our community and I thought I needed to check it out. So I love cod liver, and not cod liver oil, actual cod liver. And so we're beginning the episode talking about that. So if you haven't tried cod liver, you might want to give it a shot. All right. So thank you for being here. As always, I'm so grateful for all of our listeners. Certainly grateful for the feedback and any comments that you all have. You can reach out to me directly if you've got some feedback. I'm always open and happy to have that. And if you are enjoying this podcast, it is really wonderful when people subscribe to the podcast. It's actually very helpful for us, and the feedback is very helpful, and also getting subscribers and leaving a review of the episode or of the podcast. All of that is very, very, very helpful. So thank you all to the people who have done that. And if you haven't already, if you are willing to do that, that would be very helpful. And I'm just grateful for all of you. I'm grateful for this show. It's almost been 1 year. So I'm really thankful that I've gotten to do this show. Every single episode is a lot of fun for me. So yeah, so happy healing. And I hope that 2023 is treating you really, really well so far. You got me on the cod liver. I mean, just the plain in the can cod livers.
Yep.
Nobody in my family will touch them. So they're all mine. I love them. I'm like, I'm sort of a little afraid of like the zombies taking over the world. And I'm like, I'll be fine because nobody's going to want to eat these cod livers out of the can that I keep.
Exactly.
So it's fine.
Yeah. So I got introduced to them probably 5 or 6 years ago now through a trucker, he was a long haul trucker, which is always hilarious. These are always good conversation starters with like health practitioners and stuff, because I used to work with long haul truck drivers. My dad's been in the industry for probably 40 years. And so he started as a trucker. He got out of the army. He did his 3 years in the army, got out, and he went into trucking, and he has been involved in the business ever since in some way, shape, or form. And most of that now is just educating them on business, how to run their business more efficiently and better. but he's also over the last probably 7 or 8 years also introduced health into that aspect because it's such an important piece. And
Mhm.
so we actually had this guy, he was just driving around, and he had been in like an Eastern European market,
Mhm.
and he found them because that's where they're super common. We have the cod up there, and so they're super common. That's a normal food for them, especially Russians love cod livers, and they eat them regularly. And so he's like, hey, like canned seafood, we talked about it all the time being on the road, that like canned salmon and sardines are great. And so he calls one time and he's like, well, what about canned cod livers? I'm like, I gotta check these out. So it's, you can't even find a US database on for their nutrition profile. You have to find the European one.
Yeah.
So then, like, I finally found that. And these things are loaded. It is amazing. I was like, these things are great. It's like I ordered like a case off of Amazon. I was like, I gotta try these things.
Uh-huh.
And then I've got a good friend. She's from Russia. She's like, oh yeah, we eat them all the time. She's like, every year my mom sends me like a couple cases from Russia. I'm like, send me some. I want those ones. But
Mhm.
they're fantastic, and I spread them around to everyone I can.
Yeah, I tried. Yeah, most people are gagging. But I also eat sardines out of the can all the
Yeah.
time.
I
Um,
tell people the cod livers are super mild. Is if you
sure.
can get past looking at them because they look like
Yeah.
wet cat food.
Yeah.
They look gross.
Yeah.
But if you can get past that, they're super mild. I always tell people if you like tuna salad, to
Mhm.
just make a tuna salad and put a can of cod liver in there
Sure.
and just eat it with the tuna salad and you don't even notice it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a great, I mean, that's what I tell people too. They
Yep.
a lot of it.
They're
So
like, no.
yeah, so I know I wanted to talk to you about mold because we got to talk about,
Okay.
but I'm like, oh, but I've got Michael on. We should be talking about thyroid and we should be talking about these other things that you're so good at all these different things. But I got to know how you got into nutrition, becoming a nutritional therapist. I
Yeah.
mean,
So it kind of goes back to my dad.
yeah, yeah, because I know you
Realistically,
worked with truck drivers, but I
yeah.
didn't
So
know. Hmm.
realistically, I grew up my whole life kind of interested. I was always an athlete in high school and at like second grade. I started in soccer. Then as I got into middle school, I also did wrestling and I got really competitive into wrestling. And as I came into high school, I did wrestling and weightlifting, which are both weight-based sports. So always being curious just about my body and my weight and those things just naturally had me interested in just being an athlete and wanting to perform better. I was always curious about just being healthier in general. But I also grew up with IBS from the time I was like 8 or 9 years old. And
Okay.
so I had tried all the conventional things and nothing worked. And so by the time before I even graduated high school, I was like, this is just how my body is. This is how it's going to be, that there's nothing that fixes this. And so went through, I had horrible knee pain. I was working, 60-hour work weeks in restaurants all day long, 5, 6, 7 days a week, long days, way too much ibuprofen, way too much caffeine, way too much sugar. Um, and so I have twin boys and they were about four to
Yeah.
6 months old at the time. And I was over at my dad's for dinner and he had made it his own goal as he had gotten into his 50s to read the 50 newest books on health and nutrition that had come out, and this was around 2014, 2015 that he had started. So that meant like all of the big paleo books and a lot of the big books that we think of now as like the like grandfathers of like this paleo functional alternative medicine movement had come out in like the early 2010s. And so those were all the books that he was reading. And he was like, what? Like, this is completely different from the last 50 years I have spent my life and what I've learned.
Right.
And so he was just sharing some of it with me. And so I was like, this is like, it makes sense. Like eating a paleo diet logically just makes sense because that's all we had
Does.
access to for the vast majority of the time. Right. So
Correct.
it's like, okay,
Mhm. Right.
well, let's try this. It wasn't to alleviate any issues. It was just like, hey, that just sounds like it makes sense. Let's just try it to be healthy. And all of a sudden, I didn't have an IBS issue for like 4 weeks. I couldn't go 4 days without some sort of issue with my IBS. And all of a sudden, it had been 4 weeks without an issue. And I was taking like half the amount of ibuprofen. I wasn't drinking caffeine in the evenings anymore. Like I just had my morning coffee. And it was like all these changes. I was like, holy cow. Like, first of all, I've gone 20 some years with IBS, like, and like every other day basically. And it's like now it's just like I've gone 4 weeks with nothing. I was like, there's something to this, and I need to figure out what it is because I've never been told any of this.
Right.
And so we're like 7.5, 8 years into just learning everything I can that is alternative medicine and all that. So, I went through the Primal Health Coach program, which
Yeah.
comes from Mark Sisson and Primal Blueprint and Primal Kitchen, that whole kind of world. Then went
Mhm.
through the NTA.
Mhm.
And from there, I have probably done about $20,000 worth of other continuing
Yeah.
education programs since then, of just this course and that course. And I've taken probably 3 courses on blood chemistry. I've taken probably
Mhm.
4 on mold. I've done organic acids and stool test,
Mhm.
programs, and just like, what else can I take? And it's, for me, it's take it, apply it, learn it, move to the next. And since
Mhm.
I'll take like multiple different courses within a certain area. So like I'll take multiple blood chemistry courses, learn blood chemistry, love it. And it's like, okay, I got this. Now I grasp this. Now I move on. And that's the mistake I see a lot of practitioners making, is they go and they go one blood chemistry course, one stool test course,
Yeah.
one Dutch test, and they do all those and they never apply any of them, and they just keep learning, thinking they need more. And it's like, no, 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 learn it, understand it,
Use it.
use it.
Mhm.
Then when you feel comfortable, move on to the next one.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Well, and I love your blood chemistry foundational course. I mean, I was telling you before we hit record, I just wanted to understand my youngest son has had a lot of health issues. And so that's why I started learning about mold. And I was like, I need to understand these blood markers a little bit better. I look at, thyroid, vitamin D. I know some basics. I've always had the sense that the normal range of the blood mark is just nonsense. Like,
Hmm.
I'm a 4'11" chick in her 50s. How many people do they put in the studies to figure out what the normal range is
That look like you.
that look like me? Like, and that's all of us, right? I was just like, they're always
Yeah.
like, oh no, your thyroid's fine. You're fine because it's in with, and I was like, I'm telling y'all, I'm not fine. So the same thing with him. So that's why I signed up for your course. And I just love, like, you're really good though. I mean, for you to just be that, you must have always been a very curious person,
Hmm.
but you take it all the way through. And I think you're right. A lot of people are grasping here and there, and they don't thread it all the way through to practice
Yeah.
and start utilizing it for a bit and then move to the next thing. I might be a little guilty of that, but my background's in clinical mental health, and I was just finding it frustrating in that world because there's so much is related to gut health and our mental health, and we're not trained that way.
No.
So, after 20 something years, I was like, I really like the nutrition piece. So I took a whoop turn. And I think before I found really where I am now, I was grasping a little bit. And maybe that's what other practitioners are doing. They have to find their area and then
Yeah.
like dig in. So I know that was a lot to like dump out there, but
Well, and just from the, kind of clinical psychology backgrounds, there's a ton of that as to why
Mhm.
they do all the different learning. Is just that imposter syndrome, right? Of, I don't know enough, I'm not enough. And so I have to learn more. I have to know more before I am good enough to help people. And one of my favorite people to follow,
Mhm.
she's now transitioned. She's had a really successful 6-figure coaching business for several years, and she's transitioning into business coaching for health practitioners now, because she
Mhm.
keeps getting so many questions like, how did you do it? How did you do it? How did you do it?
Victoria?
And no,
No. Okay. I was like,
Eleni. Her name's Eleni.
Lenny. Okay.
Um, so
Cool.
she's one of my favorite things that she talks about is like, you don't have to know everything.
Yeah.
You just have to be one step ahead of whoever you're helping. That's
Yeah.
really it. You just have to help them get to the next step. If nothing else, you don't have to master everything. It's like, sure, there are people out there who know more than you, and it's okay, because they're probably, like, for me, I don't work with like people coming from a standard American diet typically.
Mhm.
Most of my clients are the complex cases who have already done the foundational work. They've made the dietary changes, they've done the lifestyle changes, they've done some gut testing and different testing and protocols, and it hasn't quite fixed the issues yet. And they're like, I'm like, what's missing? Why isn't this working yet? And it's like, those are the ones I get. So it's like, yeah, I have to know more to be able to help them. I've got to know some of those complex things. But it's like, if I was working with a standard American person that was just coming from a standard American diet, hadn't made any changes, how I approach that person would be vastly different. I wouldn't need all of those tools and knowledge and things.
Right.
It's like, hey, we can start with the basics here.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I tend to get people that have already gone a pretty far road too.
Yeah.
So what I have you always been that confident in what you go at? Because I think I was like, I really feel like maybe you're just born that way. But
There's definitely just some natural confidence as well. And
mhm,
so and some of that has come. I mean, even still, like I'm mentoring under someone right now, and we were going through like some case studies of mine, and just like, okay, so here's the profile, and here's what I ended up doing. And he's like, honestly, like pretty good. It's like, here's an adjustment here, an adjustment there. He's like, really, you did pretty well. And I'm like, yes. Like it's so good for me, as confident as I typically am, to have that validation from someone that I look up to. Because it's like, hey, like, did I do everything that I could have for this person?
right, right. Yeah, I get it. And you have a brother that's I think I don't you have a brother?
I mean, I do, but not in this space.
Okay, not in the
No,
nutrition space. Is
no.
he in the trucking space?
No, so it was funny. I actually just had a great like 2 hour lunch with him yesterday. He's in completely different. He's in heating and air. Um, but he's been doing that. He was well, that's funny because I followed after him. He was in restaurants for probably the first 10 years. His knee pain, just he had some surgeries when he was younger from accidents. His knee pain just got so bad he couldn't work in them anymore. So he just had to get off of the floors. So he ended up getting into heating and air. But he actually just moved and has now gone into opening his own business doing that. And so him and I just like sat down and had just like a nice long chat. It was just about like all things taxes and business and
Nice.
awesome things like that. So that was cool. It's also cool because
Okay.
he's my older brother. So to be able to like be the younger brother helping him with that stuff is a cool feeling.
That is cool. Well, you've had an amazing year. And
It has. I've had an amazing 2 years. It's
yeah.
really been incredible.
And congratulations on your marriage
Yeah.
because you got engaged and married and
Yep. Yeah. So
all
we
kinds
got
of
engaged back in February, and then we were married in August.
awesome. Yeah, it
Yep.
looks like just a very happy time, a very happy year for
It
you.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Business is good. Personal life is good. We just need to buy a home now. That's all we're looking for right now. That's the 2023 goal.
So, well, I'm sure that that will happen for you. I have no doubt that that will happen. But that kind of brings me to the mold talk because you
Yep.
were living in a
That's
situation. Yeah. So you're looking for a home that doesn't have mold
yes.
because you've already realized you had some issues. And I think that's what I really wanted to talk to you about too, because I was going through your kind of your checklist of things to look out for if you've got mold illness. Well, first of all, the symptoms were like,
Mhm.
that's really important for people to know because I think a lot of people have those symptoms but don't realize that there's mold related to those. They don't know
Yeah.
what's happening. And then the other thing, I was like, yeah, yeah, okay, get out of the mold situation, retrain your limbic system. You've got to have support for your
Yes.
nervous system. A lot of people don't know that. But then you said, supporting mast cells. And I was like, uh oh, I don't think I know how to do that. I'm going to have to ask Michael how to do that. So I thought we could talk about like your story, kind of how, and I know you work with people that have got mold illness too. So,
Yeah, so I mean, even just doing the limbic system can be a huge help for the mast cells, and that is a huge thing. and,
okay.
and not just for mold, for anyone dealing with
Yeah.
some chronic issues,
Yep.
especially whether it's mold or not. If you feel like you were just not making progress, you've tried different things that should work and they're not working, and
Yep.
working with practitioners, is you really have to start looking at the nervous system and limbic system, and some good programs for that. I guess too, if you're not super sensitive to like changes and supplements, or if they're when you're sensitive, you know that you're sensitive, right? And it's not like, oh, emotionally you're sensitive. Sometimes they are, but like
Right.
sensitive to these protocols and changes where you have to go slow. If you are, then Gupta is the better program, which is GUPTA.
Okay. Hmm.
You can do both of these online, which is fantastic. You purchase these programs and their trainings that you do online. The other one is DNRS.
Yeah.
That one tends to be not so great for people who are more sensitive. It
Right.
tends to be a bit too much.
Mhm.
My wife does Gupta. I could do either. She's like, oh, we're going to Gupta. And so a lot of the clients I work with, I tend to push towards that one. And if both of them are good, but it's like, if you're like, I'm not sure if I am, go with Gupta so that we don't cause a problem. It's always kind of like the safety net to go to. They're both great, But it's
Yeah,
like, if you don't know if you're sensitive, and maybe you are, Gupta is going to be the better option. If you know you're sensitive, definitely go. If you can take like handfuls of supplements and change things up, and you don't feel a whole lot of difference, DNRS is probably going to be just fine.
sure. Right.
That's me. I can. It's like most supplements. I'm like, sure, I think I noticed a difference.
Right. You're pretty hardy. That's why I was sort of
Yeah.
surprised to see your results from the
Oh
toxin
yeah, my if you
because
look at my mold panel, it is a mess. Yeah, they are very high level. Now, and I talked to the good friend of mine who's a functional MD. He's like, here's the good news about that. He's like, you've probably got a decent amount of like mold colonization in you, but the good news is your body's getting rid of it.
right.
Right. Is you because what we're measuring in those urine tests is excretion.
Yeah.
And so it's really important. It's good that I do have high levels, because that means like those pathways are open and my body is pushing those toxins out
So I'm just sitting here thinking somebody could actually have low levels in their urine test, but
and
actually
still
be
have mold toxicity.
feeling
Yes.
pretty horrible because they're not actually getting rid of it.
Yep.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of
Yeah.
things that can, with like sensitive clients and things like that,
Right.
that we can do before to kind of start opening those pathways up before we do the test to
Mhm.
see, especially if we know there's known mold exposure. Like, we knew you lived in a moldy home for 2 years and you do a urine test and it doesn't show up. My guess is that you're not excreting, not that you don't have the issue. If we look at symptoms, we look at exposure, we look at those things, we look at timelines.
Right.
That's where one of the things I always talk about, especially in my mastery courses, or we just finished up the last call. One of the things that's really always having on is so often we want to hone on this one marker, right, or this one test. And it's like, it's never this. It's like, what if this is this? It's like, okay, well, what about this marker and that marker? Like, what's the whole picture?
Right.
What's the whole picture of the blood labs? Do you have other labs? What's their symptomology? Like, we have to step back and look at this person as a whole. What does it all say? Because no marker, no test is perfect. It's
Right.
always should be seen and viewed as the context of the person as a whole.
Perfect. I love it. And I love that you am really kind of excited now too to see the abnormal normals. So
Mm-hmm.
looking at
I
when
love
somebody
those.
is in the normal range, but they're actually having symptoms, you can see, well, I'm beginning to be able to see now
Yeah.
why that might be. And I'm like, first thing I look for is dehydration. Next thing I look for is low HCl. I mean, like low stomach acid. So like I'm learning a lot of things from you about where to look at the whole picture. I think I've always been pretty good at seeing things holistically, just sort of naturally.
Mm-hmm.
So that can come in kind of handy. But when people are coming in with symptoms, what makes you think, if you don't know it's mold, what makes you think, what kind of symptoms would people have?
So, big one for me
Mhm.
is someone who we don't think has blood sugar issues, right? So again, a lot of people come to me already on a pretty good whole food diet. So we're
Mhm.
not expecting blood sugar to be a major problem, but they're
Mhm.
waking up often, multiple times during the night
Yep.
to urinate, and then they go right back to sleep. So like stress and blood sugar issues, you wake up and now you're stuck. And it takes 30, 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours to go back to sleep, right? Your mind is racing, you have issues going back to sleep. Can still be mold. But what's a really telltale sign is you wake up multiple times to urinate, and you often urinate during the day all day long. Even like maybe you're using electrolytes, but you're drinking water and you just don't retain it. One of the things that mold can do is deplete a hormone called your ADH, which is your anti-diuretic hormone. Now,
Mhm.
this is an anti-diuretic hormone.
Right.
So,
So it's supposed
right,
to
so we
hold the water in.
exactly. So if we have a good amount of that, it holds the water in. If we don't have any of that hormone, we basically have a diuretic effect all the time. So we're constantly losing water. That's me. My morning drink is a 32-ounce mason jar with like 5 different electrolytes in it,
Yes, I've
like
seen your
electrolyte blends.
cocktail.
Yeah. And so it is because I hold, and so it's like I don't hold on to those minerals very well. And we can see that. So like on the blood test for that albumin marker, is my
Uh-huh.
albumin's never under 5, like ever. Doesn't matter how hard I focus on hydration. That thing, like, it's like the best I've had is 4.9 in the last like 4 years.
Mhm.
And it was after I started implementing that, like, just whole mess of electrolyte cocktail. That's what I have to do just to be, even halfway decent. Ideally, that, and like, that's still too high, but it's because my body doesn't hold on to that. Now I'm taking melatonin now, which has been a huge help. But it's like I was waking up multiple times a night, on average 2 to 4 times a night to go to the bathroom.
See,
I'd wake up, go to the bathroom, and go right back to sleep.
okay. So it's not that somebody's waking up multiple times, but they actually have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, that's usually the big sign, is the
Okay.
waking up with having to go to the bathroom. And
Got
that's
it.
usually what wakes them up, because and it's the same thing. Like, I just, throughout the day, I'm drinking and I'm constantly urinating because my body just doesn't hold on to it very well.
Mhm.
With kids,
Yeah.
wetting the bed.
Okay.
So kids who are potty trained, and then all of a sudden they're still having issues wetting the bed because they don't get that signal as well, right? Like, they don't realize, like, hey, I'm waking up and I have to go to the bathroom. And so they're like kind of tossing and turning, and they end up wetting the bed.
Got it.
And so
Okay.
that can be a mold issue with kids.
Right. And what are some of the other mold?
So symptoms, a lot of people don't even know how to explain some of the mold specific symptoms. So when they hear it, they're like, yes, that. So for me, I had no idea how to explain it. As a practitioner, I had no idea how to explain it, other than, like, it almost felt like acute gout attacks, like really short gout attacks. They
Like
were like
pain, shooting pain.
deep shooting pain, but it would last 2 to 5 seconds usually.
Okay.
Like, a never really more than 10 seconds. They're called ice pick pains.
Yeah.
This is pretty specific to mold. Sometimes Bartonella, which is like a Lyme co-infection.
Yeah.
Um, but it's usually mold, and it's because of how mold can affect the nerves. And it can be anywhere. And that was a problem. It was like, it'd be my toe, it'd be my hand, it'd be like above my knee. And it just, like, all out of nowhere. I'm like sitting on the couch. My wife and I are like cuddling on the couch, and all of a sudden I'm just like, ow. Like, and it's just like out of nowhere. And she's like, like, we're just laying here. What did I do?
Mhm.
And it's just like, oh, and I just like rub it out, and then it's gone after a few seconds. But it is incredibly annoying.
Yeah.
The other one, I'm incredibly thankful I don't deal with this, which just makes it really hard for me to describe, because again, there's these weird sensations. So you do the best that I can based off of others' experience, but it's like internal trembling, and
Yeah.
it's like you're driving in a vehicle, but you could just be sitting here, and that,
Right.
like,
Vibration.
vibration, and
Mhm.
that can literally be like, but inside your
Yep.
body, it almost feels like that.
Right.
Another one is like skin crawling sensations.
Yeah.
I literally, like, I've been so self-conscious when I, like, sit in church, that, like, the people behind me probably think that I'm like cracked out, and
Because
like
you're like
me,
wiggling
and
and
because I'm
moving.
literally like, I'm just always like scratching myself, and it's like, oh nope, now I got one over here, and now I've got one here. And I know, like, I was like, I wasn't always like this. Like, this is just, I don't know when this started, but man, like, it's just like this all the time kind of thing. And so that, again, like, that it feels like something is just kind of like, it's a different itch. It's not like a normal kind of itch that you might get. It just feels like something is almost like on your skin, and you're just like, oh, like, I have, right.
Yeah. Now
Now that I've been
I'm
doing
like,
it, now I'm
wait,
bringing
wait a
attention
minute.
into it, and
Right.
it's getting worse. So those are some
Right.
big, like, really common, like, usually somewhat specific to mold. Not a whole lot of other things can affect that. Thankfully, I have noticed, specifically for me at least, the ice pick pains seem to go away as long as I keep on things like alpha lipoic acid. It has been amazing for me. A few hundred milligrams a day of that. I ran out a couple weeks ago. I forgot to order it, and I ran out, and they came back, and I was like, oh, man. And now I've been on it again for the last week or two, and they, like, never happen. I'm like, okay, cool. And the key for me is that I know ALA is used for diabetic neuropathy.
Yes.
Um,
Mhm.
Even in allopathic medicine, they use that for diabetic neuropathy. So I'm like, well, let's give it a try, because it's the nerves. And so thankfully it's been helping so far. Those are some big ones. Mast cell activation syndrome.
Yes. So that's
The
what I started
Yeah.
learning, because
So
it can
the
actually feel like
majority,
almost a shock in your system, like
yeah,
and more actual getting shocked,
yeah,
like
static.
electrical static
Hmm.
shocks. Okay, so yeah, the mast cell activation syndrome really sent me down a major rabbit hole, because I was like, this could be so many people that have,
Hmm.
you get turned away by every doctor think because they have no idea what's
No, and
actually
there's no good lab test for it. There's
no
just
good lab
none.
test.
We
I
don't
know.
have any good functional
Mhm.
allopathic blood. It doesn't matter. We don't have a great test
Mhm.
for mast cell activation syndrome. So it's a lot of symptomology, and
Right.
a huge chunk of those are mold. The vast majority of people with mast cell activation, it's mold driving it,
Right.
and they
Sometimes
go,
Lyme, right? Could be Lyme too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But most
So
of it, yes, gonna be
and so
mold.
often Lyme gets reinstated by mold. Mold
Right.
tends to be like the big one that like when you look at like EBV, you look at mast
Yep.
cell, you look at Lyme, a lot of that takes place because we look at how many people have been bit by ticks. So then the amount of people that actually deal with chronic Lyme is vastly different because same with EBV, 95% of adults in the US have EBV in their
EBV.
body,
Correct.
but only maybe, 5 to 10% actually deal with chronic EBV symptoms. Now, it's getting much worse over the last 3 years
Yeah.
because something that's been happening over the last 3 years
Mm.
has caused a lot of issues with these dormant infections. Because it is this big cytokine storm on the immune system, it's now bringing out a lot. You've seen huge spikes in EBV, in Lyme, in co-infections, in mold.
Mhm.
And it's just like, I don't think it's just awareness. It is,
Mhm.
I've had so many people, like I did on a discovery call, and what happens is they felt okay, they were doing okay, they had fixed a lot of health issues, and then they got that
Mm.
thing,
Yep.
and then and then it just downhill, like
That's
just
Yep, that's my
yep,
son,
yep.
17-year-old. Just unbelievable. And so of course they call it long COVID
Oh,
because they
yep,
have no idea
yep.
what to
And
do with
most
them.
of it, and we have studies looking at. There was a study looking at that with long haulers and
Mhm.
EBV and reactivated EBV, and like 65%
Yeah,
of long haulers had reactivated EBV.
right. So now I'm like, no one can help here that I've
No.
found. So I'm like, all right. So I've been studying hard to try and help him. So I'm a huge fan of red light
Hmm.
therapy. Um, I started using it myself because you buy these panels for
Yep.
hundreds of dollars, and you're like, if he's not going to use it, I'm using it. And I was like, my energy went through the roof. My sleep
Hmm.
improved, and I was already a good sleeper. I was like, this is amazing. So we're doing all of these things to try and help. But what is if you're still in the mold situation? That's a problem. And
Yeah.
so, you know, we're in that whole process of figuring it out. And I don't think it's here. It's possible it's in a
School.
girlfriend's
Mm.
house or where he
Yep.
spends an enormous amount of time.
He doesn't spend time at home. He's a
No,
17-year-old with a girlfriend. He does not spend time at home.
that's correct. So as much as he can, he is not here. So it's but we haven't been able to figure it out. But I'm just thinking like for people that are like, "Oh my gosh, I've had all this stuff. I've been doing all the right things, but I still feel awful." Um this is what we're talking about. Like
Mhm.
it could be mold, it could be something else.
Yep.
But the way out of it, the way to find your way out of it, where would you recommend people even start?
Yeah. So for me, for example, I knew I was in a moldy home. It was visible. At the
Right.
time, I just wasn't financially in a space where I could even think of getting out of there. It just
And
wasn't possible. I was renting. And when I
yeah,
brought it up to the landlord, it was a private landlord. So it wasn't like a big office. It was just private, which makes it even a
harder.
50-50 shot of either they're great or they're really cheap. And I was in this camp. And so they literally like the owner sent their father over who did all the like housework and he basically painted over it.
Right.
And I'm like, that's not how you get rid of mold.
Correct.
But I'm like, okay. I'm like, obviously this just is what it is, and we're not going to get anywhere. And so I was like, all right, so I'm stuck in it. And so there are things that you could do. A lot of people are like, oh, well, you just can't heal while you're in it. And it's like, true, you're not going to get all the way better.
But
And you
yeah,
can still do things,
yeah.
right? There are still things that you can do. You can minimize that exposure. You can do things like keeping your windows open as much as possible because it's toxic. It's toxicity, right? And with toxicity, if you look at the study of toxicology, the biggest thing they talk about is poison makes it, or the dose makes the poison,
Correct.
right? So it's like oxygen at a high enough concentration is poisonous, right?
Mhm.
Water at a high enough, like if you drink enough pure water, you
Right.
die. You have a
Right.
heart attack because you run out of electrolytes. And so
Correct.
it's like the dose makes the poison. And so by opening the air, by opening the windows, we dilute the air. So we get less mold spores per breath and things like that, right? It's like
Yeah.
we can wash things, the linens and things like that. So like our bedding, we can wash more often. We can clean our shower curtain more often, which tends to get that.
Hmm.
We can, so there are things that we can do if you have a front loading washer. If you can get rid of a front loading washer, that's fantastic. Those things are terrible. That rim is super, super bad for getting mold. But
Mhm.
Top loading washers aren't immune to it either. So just having good cleans and things like that. Dishwashers, that's another one. A lot of people don't. I am so bad. I had no idea you're supposed to like clean your filter in your dishwasher like every
Mhm.
couple months. That thing
Yeah.
is, if you've never done it, I want you to go do it at the time of listening to this. Like
Yeah.
pause this and go look and
Yeah.
YouTube how to clean dishwasher filter and then do it. And it's gross.
It's gross. Yeah.
So if you
Yeah.
haven't been doing it, you're welcome.
And I run vinegar through the
Mhm.
wash machine,
Yep.
and I use vinegar all around, like, just to keep that stuff all clean.
Yep.
And that seems to help a little bit, or at least in my head, it's helping. So, mhm.
Yeah, so it's those things. And then like, what are we putting in our laundry? How are we cleaning our laundry? So, because again, what we're wearing, that's going to have a huge, a huge result. And cloth and linen, things like that is definitely susceptible to mold spores. So using a solution called EC3.
Huh.
They
Okay.
have a laundry additive. They have household sprays to be able to clean with. So using those things, if you just like Google EC3
EC3.
additive or laundry additive or anything like that, or EC3 mold, it'll come up. You'll find their website. They've
Oh,
got a couple different things. So using that for your laundry, using that for when you're cleaning and things like that to just start killing some of those mold spores so it doesn't continue, that can help, right? So we're not going to get rid of everything, but
right.
it can help. It's like do what you can until you can change that circumstance. Open up your drainage and detox pathways so that, again, just like my body, it's like, hey, yeah, there are high levels, but at least you're getting it out of your system, right? So it's
Right.
not continuing to build.
And specifically, how are you doing that? Like, do you do sauna? Are you doing
Yeah, so it's
sweat?
supporting lymphatics, it's supporting supporting kidney and liver, so staying hydrated, minimizing other toxic exposures,
Like
eating good.
alcohol, cigarettes,
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
yeah,
If you're a woman looking at your cosmetics, any of those different
correct.
things, anything we're putting on our body, especially things that stay on our body, like cosmetics, are going to be a huge deal. So looking at that any way we can reduce. We're in, scented candle season. So what kind of candles are you using?
Right.
Right? Like those are going to be big things. If you, this is a new, I'm super excited. I wish I remember the name of this company. We just got a new essential oil diffuser
Ooh,
because if you've ever diffused oils and had an essential oil diffuser, those
yeah,
things suck at they grow mold really well.
right.
So this one doesn't use water.
Oh,
It distills directly from you actually connect the bottle to the thing itself and it diffuses directly from the bottle without water so that it
how
doesn't grow
cool is
mold.
that? All
Yeah.
right. Yeah, you'll have to show
So
me that so I can add
yeah, so the last thing
it.
you need is, if you've already got mold, is diffusing mold into the air, diffusing those spores into the air as that vapor comes up, pulls those mold spores into your nose, which are already, hopefully into your nose if you're breathing that way,
Right,
which is
right. Not
already
through the
where we're
mouth,
getting so
people.
much.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's another big area that when people are dealing with mold illness, as they're going through the protocols, they don't think about the nose, which is where most of that, your first exposure to that mold is. If it's in the air, is hopefully, again, if you're nose breathing through your nose and it colonizes there and we don't deal with that. So even, and that can be something that you can take care of, like, and you can support while you're still in mold to minimize it. So I like to use Argentin 23.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a silver spray. It's a hydrosol versus like the colloidal silver. I'm not a big fan of the colloidal silver because it can be too, you can get toxicity from it easier
Yeah,
because the particles are too big. The Argentin 23 uses a different formula and it's a hydrosol. The particles are smaller and toxicity isn't really an issue. But
great.
silver is a super great anti like everything. And
True.
so it can really help break up the biofilms and things like that. Otherwise, you can also use bee propolis sprays. So they have the propolis sprays that you can use in your nose as well. And that's
Mhm.
also amazing against that as well. So that way, again, we're
Yeah,
keeping that from just really housing and colonizing. And the
yes.
reason it's so bad is one, you're breathing it, but all of that, all of your sinus drip, where does that go?
Oh, yeah.
Back of your throat into your gut.
Yeah.
And then it colonizes in your gut. And that's how
Mhm.
we get that mold in our gut. And then that colonizes. And so then you move out of the mold and you're like, okay, I'm fine. And then you're not. You still feel like junk because mold has colonized in your body. So it's like you're still living in it.
Yeah. So at that point, would you recommend binders? Are you using binders?
Yeah, so there's a lot of steps. So it's like we have
Mhm.
to support those mast cells. We've got to start stabilizing those mast cells. We've got to stabilize the nervous system, which is really like step one, because that's going to allow everything else to actually work. If your limbic system is like an absolute mess, everything else you do is not going to work very effectively. So
Correct.
it's like, get that rested first. Begin. It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
perfect, but start working on that as step one. Start getting that
Right.
body to calm down. Work on mast cells, and then it's working on bowels. Bowels are like step two. You
Oh
have to
yeah.
have daily bowel movements, right? We've got to have that movement. The last thing we want to do is start other detox while the bowels are still terrible. So
Hmm.
we've got to work on those bowels. So that, because if we're eliminating those through the bowels, through the liver, through the gallbladder, and the bile into the bowels,
Yeah.
and we're constipated and we're going every day, we reabsorb those toxins,
Yep.
and now we've got a whole new problem. So
Right.
it's always ensuring that the bowels are moving all the time, every day, good, healthy bowels.
Right.
Then it's
Hmm.
like, if we've got those things in place, then we can start opening up the pathways. I don't even get to like binders. It's like, hey, let's support the lymphatic system.
Hmm.
So we can use herbs, we can use movement, we can use exercise, rebounding, dry brushing, any of those things that start moving the lymphatics, because the lymphatic system is how your body detoxes
Right.
from your cells to your liver. Right.
Correct.
So it has to, the cells, it comes out of the cells, often using glutathione, to move it out
Mhm.
of the cell through GGT on that blood test.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
so it's using that, it pulls that toxin out, and then that's going to go in the lymphatic system to deliver that to the liver, where now we can move that out. So we have to move, we've got to get that lymphatic system supported first. Now it's like, okay, we're there. Now we support that liver and kidney. So we're hydrating, right? We're using herbs and proteins and vitamins to help support that, as well as eating fat. Everyone always forgets about eating fat when we talk about detox, but we
Mhm.
primarily detox through our bile, which
Mhm.
is in our liver, and we stimulate the release of bile through ingesting fat. So
Right.
if we don't eat enough fat, we don't signal the bile to be released, and those toxins build up in our gallbladder, and then we get gallstones and we get gall sludge, and then we have to have our gallbladder removed.
Mhm.
So it's like, we've got to eat fat to get all that process moving. So we got to have all that happening. And then it's like, yeah, now we're using binders. We're bringing binders. And we do, binders can naturally be constipating. So again, always keep an eye. Are those bowels, did those negatively
Moving.
shift? Are they
Mhm.
still moving? Just keeping that. It's like GI detox is a super common binder that a lot of people like. One of the reasons why it works so well is they also put aloe leaf in there to
Uh-huh. So your
help.
poop.
Yep. So we keep those things moving. It's very calming to the digestive system and stimulating to make sure
Mhm.
that keeps moving, because we know that binders can be constipating. It's
Yes.
like, those are like kind of the key areas that we're working on. But it's like, when we measure the specific mycotoxins, we can see what pathways are they being detoxed through. Different mycotoxins get detoxed in different pathways in the liver. Got about
Uh-huh.
6 of those different pathways in the liver. And everyone always jumps to glutathione,
Mhm.
and it's not actually the most common. And people are like, oh, you've got mold, you need glutathione. It's like, maybe, maybe not. What you might actually need is calcium diglucarate.
Mhm.
The glucuronidation pathway is far more common from the majority of mycotoxins than the
Oh,
glutathione pathway.
I did
So
not know
something
that.
like
Mhm.
calcium diglucarate is going to do far better for most people, as just a general broad, sense, for helping to detox these mycotoxins than glutathione will necessarily. And a lot of people just aren't ready for glutathione. A big signal that you have mast cell issues is if you take glutathione and feel like crap.
Right.
If glutathione makes you feel worse, you likely have mast cell issues, because glutathione comes into the cell and pulls that toxin, it binds to the toxin inside the cell and then moves outside of the cell. Now, when
Right.
we do that, anytime we pull toxins out and we're mobilizing them, well, they're
Mhm.
toxins, and your body's like, hey, alert, we need to deal with this. And guess what it uses to deal with it? Histamines and mast cells.
Right.
And so if your mast cells are already an issue, and you've already got excess amounts of mast cell activation, you've already got excess histamines, and now you pull more toxins out,
You're
now
gonna
you get
just
this
be
big flare.
super reaction.
And
Yep.
so a big sign that can happen is you take glutathione and you feel like junk. It's like,
Mhm.
and you can take glutathione and feel good and still have mold issues. But if you take it and you have issues, it's a big sign that we definitely have some mast cell issues. And that's a big sign that we might have mold issues.
Right. Whew.
Yeah.
I know. I also, I mean, just from a quantum perspective, I think a lot of people go straight to detox. I got to detox. And
Yeah.
you cannot, because you have to, I call it redox before you detox.
Yeah.
And that in our world, that's what we talk about. But you've got to build the body up,
Yep.
and you've got to be able to be hydrated, not just hydrated, you got to be cellularly hydrated.
Yep.
And so you've got to support your mitochondrial health. You got to support all of these things. And I think people, it's a slower kind of process, but you're going to
Yep.
feel a whole lot better if you go in that route
Yes.
than if you just hit the detox. You're going to feel awful and it's just going to backfire.
hmm Or people are like, "Oh yeah, I was living in a mold." Like I've had so many clients who came to me and it didn't
Mhm.
work because what they tried to do is they're like, "Oh yeah, I was living in this moldy place. I moved out and I took charcoal for like 3 months,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
I was like, I started feeling better maybe." Or they're like, I just thought, maybe it was done, and then they're still not feeling better. I'm like, yeah, that's not gonna cut
Mm,
it. Like, we're gonna
right.
need to do more than that, and it is. It's so many steps, and those steps need to be done in the right process. It's
Mhm.
it's essentially we need to go through it like an assembly line. And if you try and skip the first four steps, let's say we're trying to build a car and you don't put the frame on before you try and put a door on, like it's not
Right.
going to work.
Right.
Right. And so it's like
Mhm.
we need to go through this process and steps. And it's why we just need to be doing this with a practitioner. I just highly recommend, even for myself, my family, like I have a practitioner that I kind of
Mhm.
talk to and discuss, like, hey, what are you saying? I might be missing this, even though I work on this with other people. Like, what am I missing? Because it's so close to home. Like, can you
Mhm.
just kind of take a second peek at this?
Oh yeah, because when it's that close to home, because there's
You
all
just
the
miss. Yep.
you miss things, and it's also there's emotion all wrapped up in there, and it's just so much harder.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I'm also mindful of our time, so I'm, like, super grateful that you're taking the time to talk about all these things because I think this is not really talked about, and people have these issues, and they have a hard time finding help. And so just trying to even just knowing that they need to take it slower, step by step kind of process and be supported is helpful. What else do you feel like is really in help? Really what people they need to work with a practitioner, get that kind of support. What else?
Yeah. So the number one thing is if you suspect that you have mold, whether and you don't know or not. And most people think, oh, my house isn't moldy because I clean, right? And it looks clean and there's no
Right
obvious.
now.
It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be obvious. It doesn't have to be this obvious like black growth down there or this
Right.
obvious water stain coming down on your walls.
Right.
Is you'd be surprised at how a lot of it isn't visible to your standard eye. It's in your HVAC system. It's in your
Right.
ductwork.
Right.
And that was something I was just talking with my brother yesterday about, because again, that's something that he
Oh
does is like
yeah. Yeah.
for a referral system for him as he grows his business, is I actually connected him with a mold remediator here in our
Perfect.
county, because it's like if he comes across an HVAC system that is just so far beyond and just needs replaced, like, hey, look, we've got this issue. I don't do HVAC system, I do mold remediation, but I know a guy who does it. And so it's like having that referral system.
Perfect.
Um,
Hmm.
so it's like it may be in areas that you have no idea about. And so getting a proper mold inspection, which the vast majority out there don't know how to do properly. So the number one group that I recommend is it's a super easy website. It's yesweinspect.com. So super easy. You go there. They have so many different websites, and they're all like really easy and great. They have different handouts, and they all end up going back. But it's like they've bought and created all these different URLs. I think their business model is fantastic. But they'll set up like a free discovery call with you to start walking you through that process of how the inspection should be, getting you connected with people, getting that process going so that you can get a proper inspection and testing done
Yeah.
to see, like, is my home an issue, is my car an issue, is my office an issue, any of those common things that you might be in. If you're in an office 8 hours a day 5 days a week, it's an
Mm.
area that should be tested. If you're probably gonna have to do it out of pocket, and then approach and say, hey, like, this is an issue if it comes up. If it's your home, same thing. If you rent, you're gonna have to your landlord's not gonna pay it for it. You're gonna have to do it out of pocket to get it tested, but then you might be able to approach them and say, hey, like, this is an issue. um it's always difficult with renting because for often, if it's not super obvious, you
Mhm.
always run the risk that they're just going to boot you. And
Oh,
like
right.
it's easier to
Right.
let you out of the lease and just put someone back in there than actually fix the problem.
Yeah.
Which is always the tough thing.
Yeah.
Because now the good news is you can just move. Um, so it's easier than when you own the home and you're like, well,
Selling
now
it.
I either
Yeah.
have to sell it
Yeah.
or fix it, and neither one of those is fun.
Or
Um,
cheap. Right.
Yeah, or cheap, or cheap. You're very right.
Right.
And so it's like that becomes more difficult. So it's like for us, like that's it's why I have a mold inspector in my pocket right now, ready to go,
Yeah.
so that when we're looking for homes, we can have that done. Like,
Right.
hey, and now whether it's moldy or it's like, I don't care if it's a house we love and it's moldy, it's cool. Just dock the price and I'll go fix it myself because I want it done properly. I don't want them to fix it. I want to fix it. Just I'll
Right.
pay you less. I'll save you the hassle.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
But that's got to be, as best
Mhm.
as possible, step number one. If you're unsure, because if you're like, well, it was a previous exposure, but I'm not sure, and I don't think it's here, and it ends up being here, then it's like, man, you could spend 6 months trying to do all the things, and it didn't make the progress because you're still in the mold.
Right.
So
Mhm.
it's like we didn't think at
Mhm.
all that we had an issue here, but we had it tested, and we spent probably $400 to have the guy come out, run some samples, and look and see. And it wasn't, which we were thankful for. But it's like I don't want to spend all this money, go through this process and all this time if we're still living in mold in this home.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so definitely looking
Yeah.
at those things. That's
Yeah.
step number one. Otherwise, working with a practitioner, starting the limbic, and again, the limbic training could be
You
for
could do it
anyone.
anybody.
Yeah,
Mhm.
whether you
Yeah.
have mold issues, you've got SIBO, you've got other things going on, like it can be so,
Mhm.
so helpful, especially if you feel like you're some major signs are like if you feel like you're reactive, oftentimes
Mhm.
short-tempered, quick, your mood, like mood
Mhm.
swings and things back and forth, you scare easily. It's just signs that your just nervous system is like just on edge,
Shot.
right? And yeah,
Yeah.
it's just shocking. You're just like you're jumpy.
Mhm.
It's just like I I don't know how. It's so funny. We always jokes that I literally like just can't approach my wife if she's in the bathroom getting ready,
Uh-huh.
because it doesn't matter if I just stand there, just wait for her to spot me. If I come in, I'm like, hey, it doesn't
It
matter to
scares
anything.
her.
All of it's gonna scare. So
Yeah.
I'm like, how do I? Should I text you for? It's
Yeah.
like,
Like, make a bunch of
um,
noise coming
yeah,
down. Yeah. Like,
yep.
yeah.
And so it's like, if those are kind of those things, that's a really big
Mhm.
sign that you're gonna really, improve from that. If you have a history of physical or emotional trauma, so it could be car accidents, right? It could be major
Mhm.
injuries. It could just be, all sorts of list of emotional trauma. Obviously, is very long.
Yep.
Any of those, your body can be stuck in that, right? And so
Yep.
those can be signs that you'd really benefit from that. And sometimes just by doing that, your symptoms improve like 80%. It is incredible sometimes where that's literally
Mhm.
your issue. It's not actually the gut. It's not actually this or
Right.
that. It's really just your nervous system.
Yeah.
And that's why
100%
nothing else
agree.
is working.
I 100% agree. And if you're eating crappy food, you probably want to go ahead and fix that while you're at it
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's not going to be helpful to people in their whole process if they're still eating
No.
crap
No.
and putting a lot of toxic stuff in and on our bodies. 100, I really appreciated you talking about that too. I don't think people realize what's in all of the products they use and the candles and all of the things.
Yeah. Car
So
air fresheners. And,
oh,
and
rah. Ugh.
the other thing is if you feel like your home needs those because it kind of has an off musty smell.
Yeah, you're probably looking at some mold.
Yeah, there's that. It's
That's
not just an old home. uh,
yeah.
it may be an old home, and maybe that's why it has even more growth. But it likely, again, is you actually probably have some mold overgrowth, and that's why. And I've been in homes where it's like I'm like, yeah, that's why.
I can feel
Um,
it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Some of us are like canaries. You throw us in there
yeah,
and you're like, I'm getting hives. So there's
yeah.
clearly something
And
toxic in
that's
this place.
so and that's a kind of a good segue, and kind of a different thing is there's kind of I kind of split people into three different categories when we look at mold.
Okay.
I am thankfully in the least problematic, but my wife is in the most problematic.
Uh-huh.
So like our symptoms are very different. Like it as much of an issue with mold that I have in my body, it hasn't affected me nearly to the extent that it's affected her. Um, so you could just have I guess technically I'm not in category one. You could just have mycotoxins in your body.
Uh-huh.
So you don't have mold colonized. You've had exposure to the mycotoxin. So mold itself isn't toxic.
Right.
Toxic mold is kind of a misnomer. The mold itself isn't toxic. It
Right.
produces toxins. And
Right.
so we call those mycotoxins, myco meaning fungal, basically.
Uh-huh.
which is what a mold is. And so they produce these mycotoxins. So you could be in a moldy area and those mycotoxins get in and they get into your system and those are there. But you never actually get the mold spores colonizing in your body. So you just have mycotoxins. That's a small percentage. It's most people who have mold issues have mold colonized in their body. But you might be lucky and you might just have the colonization. And that could affect you to different degrees, but that's what you've got. You just have the mycotoxins. Now, the middle category is probably the majority of people where you've got colonization and you have obviously then the mycotoxins because those mold spores colonized in you are going to release. That's most people. About 80% dealing with mold illness will have colonized mold spores in them, usually in their digestive tract, also in their nose. The people who are like, they are complete mess. They're like the poster children for mold issues is because they're also allergic to mold.
Right.
So those are the people, like you said, they go into a moldy building within 15 minutes. They have headaches, they have hives, they have all sorts of issues like popping up. I can go in a moldy building. I'm like, yeah, it smells musty, but it doesn't bother me. Like I'm not getting symptoms from it other than it's like, well, this is kind of gross and I don't really want to be in here. And I'm not thinking like I'm just getting more and more exposure. But I'm not like, I don't have obvious symptoms from that exposure. But it's like my wife's in there within 10, 15 minutes. She's like, I gotta go. Like I can't, like
I can't breathe in here. I can't.
Like I can't breathe. Like I'm getting headaches. She's getting migraines. And it's like though, and that makes it so bad because if you have if you have mold colonized in your system, and you're allergic to mold, you're essentially at that point, you're allergic to yourself. Because it's in you. You're never away from it. That's why you feel so terrible all the time.
Yeah.
Because you're basically and that's where mast cell activation syndrome starts popping in because your immune system is just on high alert 24/7.
Well, and autoimmune stuff can start
so
to
often
pop
you
up
get stuck in that. Yeah.
Because now your body's
exactly
just overreacting, histamine reactions. You feel like you're allergic to absolutely everything. That's me. That was me. I'm getting better and better every day, which is amazing. But your wife and I could hang out in the same places for the same amount of time. We're like, we gotta go. This is So but that makes sense to me. Those 3 different camps. I put people in 3 camps a lot, actually. It seems like
it usually tends to, that's like the magic number.
Right? I'm like, oh, whether so that's funny that we're
camping. And the reality is you could have mold allergies and not mold illness. So always organizing that. It's like just because you go in those buildings and start to get hit doesn't mean you have mold illness. Right. But it's like you could just have a mold allergy. And so that's technically like a 4 subsect. It's like, I also don't want people freaking out that it's like, oh, every time I go in a building, and it's like now they think that they do. You may not. You might just have the mold allergy.
And whatever's going on, you can still feel amazing and and heal. I think that so whatever's going on, whatever camp you're in, or some subset of it, if you're an outlier, you can still work on yourself, work on your health, and you can get to the place where you feel great. And I think that I did not think I would ever get there personally. And so I'm super grateful and trying to help other people realize that they don't stop. If you still feel crappy most of the time, you're not there yet. We haven't figured it out.
2 things there. If you are stuck in that negative thought process all the time, not just about your health, but you notice about everything, Gupta and DNRS, that's a huge sign that you need that. That becomes a huge side effect of those, especially for like, man, I wasn't always like this. I wasn't always such a negative person.
Right.
And all of a sudden you've realized you have. That comes from that nervous system and limbic system being thrown off. And those trainings can be super helpful and make you, again, like, I'm not myself anymore. Like, so often what people come to me is they're like, I am not me. And that's where doctors are like, here's an antidepressant. It's like, no, that's not going to fix. I don't want to be numb. I still want to feel. I just don't want to feel just negative all the time. It's getting out of that. And just the last piece on that is feeling like, I'm never going to get out of this. And again, some of that, it's not just your fault. Those negative thoughts aren't your fault. It's how your nervous system is now set and responding. And so doing that training is super helpful. But also just to start putting the conscious thought of like giving up at this, but you've probably put years and who knows how much money and effort into it. Don't stop now. Right. By stopping now, all of it was a waste. Right. And so it's that illustration of the guy that's mining for diamonds. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but he's mining for diamonds. He's like underground and he's got a pickaxe and there's two guys, and there's a tunnel up here, and this guy's in it, and he stops and turns around, and he's an inch away from a whole batch of diamonds, and he gives up. And the other guy is underneath
Comes
him and
in.
gets all the diamonds because he never gave up. And it's like you could be that one step, that one person, that one thing away. It's like, don't stop. Now you've spent all of that time. Why give up now?
Yeah. My dad used to say, never, never, never give up. So it's
Change
just,
what you're doing, try
yeah,
different things,
yeah,
but don't give up.
right. Don't
Don't
keep
just keep
eating.
doing the same thing over and over. We know what that means.
Right. That's
But
crazy
don't give
making.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
don't give up.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, that's the message of hope. So for you, what nourishes your soul? Because you give a lot to other people. I know you're working on your own health journey too, but what really seems to nourish your soul?
So many things. I don't know. It's funny because we talked about it's just me being kind of like naturally confident. I think
Mhm.
I'm just incredibly blessed to have a naturally positive approach and just attitude in general.
Mhm.
Most people around me find it just ridiculous and just annoying at certain times, my wife included. She's just like, it's too much. But I don't know. I've always kind of been that way. It's just like there's just a how my brain is wired. I don't think it's any one thing that I've ever necessarily done. I literally just think some of that just does come down to genetics at a certain point of like, I am just wired in a way to, it definitely wasn't my childhood. I can tell you that.
No.
There were plenty of that went wrong there. No,
Okay.
it is
Okay.
not like, oh, I had a bit. No, it's like parents divorced at 4. One lived in Florida, one lived in Washington. Very like, yeah. So there's plenty that went wrong there.
Mhm.
But there was still it's just but I was always a positive even as a kid. I was still positive in a lot of different ways, and it's just stayed. And now it's like at this point it's like, why not be? Like, to me it's so hard. I have to remind myself it's like it's not that easy for everyone else. It comes very easy to me. So that's it. My faith obviously is a huge piece of that brings just a lot of just again hope and all of that. It's like, hey, like, it's okay, it's gonna be
Mhm.
fine. Like, whether or not this life is perfect, like there's still more. And
Mm.
so it's reality, this life isn't gonna be perfect. We look around, the last 3 years have told us that. But it's like, even in the midst of it, and also just turning off the news. I don't know what's going on in the world most of the time. I don't know, but
Me either.
unless I happen to see it because other people share about it in their story
Yeah.
or it pops up in like, I don't know about it happening, and I am 100% okay with that. I have let go of the kind of social morality ideal that we have to know all the different bad things going on in the world so that we can fight for all the different bad things going on in the world, because
Yeah.
none of those people 99% of those people aren't actually fighting for anything other than like making sure they post about it, and it
Right.
doesn't go beyond that. And it's like, talk about needing to reset your like nervous and limbic
Nervous
system
system. Yeah.
because of what you're taking in through that. My
Yeah.
life is so much happier because I don't read the news, I don't watch the news, I don't listen to the news.
Yeah.
I have my world and the things that I focus on and my mission, and that's what I worry about.
Mhm.
And it, I know there's a lot of sad things going on, and I pray for the world as a whole. I don't need to pray for each and every single individual problem to be
Mhm.
able to pray for the world. So it's like I pray for the world just as a whole, and it's like it's not that I don't want to say that I can't make an impact. It's like I have to first preserve. It's like putting on your
Your
own
mask
oxygen
for
mask first,
right.
right? It's like you
Exactly.
have to preserve yourself first. I have to be able to take, especially as the sole breadwinner of my family, like, I have to be able to take care of myself so that my business can operate, so that I can support my family before anything else.
Right.
And my clients. If I'm not able to support myself, I can't support my
Exactly.
clients. And
Yeah.
then my purpose is
Yeah.
gone.
Right. Exactly. I think by minding our own business and doing what we can to take care of ourselves and our own business is helping the world.
Yep.
Because if you're constantly I mean, just think about when we're talking about mold too, like when there's something sucking the life out of you, and your light can't shine, how's that
Yep.
helpful for anybody? So, yeah, I had to quit watching the news after I had kids because I noticed my
Oh
anxiety was
yeah.
going through the roof, and I was already anxious and I just couldn't. And
Yeah.
it was one thing I'm glad I gave up. because it
Yeah.
doesn't bother me to not. I figure somebody will tell me
If
we
it's
need.
that bad.
Yeah, if we need to,
Yeah.
do something, move, get out of the way,
Yeah.
then somebody will tell
Someone
me.
someone will scream duck.
Yeah. Yeah. So I agree. So I really love talking to you. I appreciate you taking time to talk to me.